All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So the New York Jets just released their first unofficial depth chart for the NFL season, and let's break it down, right? Because I think there are some surprises here in this setup. So let's first take a look at the offense. So taking a look at wide receiver one, it's Garrett Wilson, right? No surprise here. But behind him in that role is Malik Taylor, which is pretty interesting. And then a quickly look at the other wide receiver options. Xavier Gibson is listed as the starting slot wide receiver above Malachi Corley. And then, of course, the other wide receiver position, Alan Lazard checks in as the starter. Irv Charles behind him, Brownlee behind him, and then newcomer Isaiah Winstead as that wide receiver four. Now, Mike Williams will probably jump up in front of Alan Lazard once he becomes healthy. Or we could probably see Mike Williams and Lazard battle it out for that, wide receiver two, right? That outside perimeter guy. Because look, if Alan Lazard continues to trend well in the right direction and there's a long onboarding process for Mike Williams, who's to say that Alan Lazard couldn't necessarily be the starter in the first couple of weeks of the season until Mike Williams is ready to go. But outside of wide receiver, we're looking at tight end. We're looking at Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert as the two starters, and then behind those guys, Zach Kuntz behind Conklin, and then Yeboah behind Jeremy Ruckert. Let's take a look at the starting five offensive line. Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Joe Tippmann, AVT, Morgan Moses. We all knew this, right? But the second team, I think, is really where it gets super interesting, because we have Olu as the backup left tackle, Jake Hansen, backup left guard at this point in time, Chris Glazer, and then Xavier Newman. I felt like Newman was. I think Newman has a pretty good shot. Or, this is unofficial, right? So things can change. I thought Newman played okay last season. Like, not calling him a top five interior offensive lineman, but for a bottom of the roster guy, I'm actually surprised to see Xavier Newman in that three hole, if you will. Behind AVT, we have Wes Schweitzer and then Cole Laval. So pretty expected there. And then backup right tackle, it's Max Mitchell, then Carter Warren. Going into camp, I figured that Carter Warren was going to be ahead of Max Mitchell, but literally from I think it was actually day one, Max Mitchell was the backup, or I guess starter at the right tackle position, because Morgan Moses has missed all this time due to injury, coming back from the torn pec. And then looking at QB and running back here, QB self-explanatory, Rodgers, Tyrod, and then Peasley. And then running back, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, and Izzy Abadaconda. Again, it's expected at this point in time, but it is pretty interesting to see this as like the unofficial depth chart on the New York Jets website, right? With Izzy as that RB4. Flipping over the defensive side of the football, at the two starting edge positions, we have Jermaine Johnson and then Michael Clemens. Now, with no Hassan Reddick, right, on the squad, you can see his name in the fourth category, right? Hassan Reddick is all the way buried at the bottom. But again, Clemens and Johnson, Will McDonald is behind Jermaine Johnson. I would have thought that Will McDonald, again, going into training camp, especially without, Reddick at camp, McDonald would have been a penciled-in starter, but it's not the case, right? Up to this point, it's not the case. Behind Clemens, it's Tack McKinley, who's been absolutely killing it. Braden McGregor behind McKinley, again, Reddick. But then if we flip back to the other edge spot, it's McDonald, then Jalen Holmes, and then Eric Watts, who's been turning heads in camp. Interior defensive linemen, the two starters, Q and Javon Kinlaw, expected. Behind those guys, Solomon Thomas, and then Lecky Fotu is the primary run stuffer. And then I also like Tanzil Smart's shot at making the roster as well. Moving over to linebacker, Jamian Sherwood, CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams as the three starting linebackers in the 4-3 system. But then behind those guys, Chaz Surratt behind CJ as that middle linebacker. And then Zaire Barnes, who was a late round pick out of Western Michigan, not this past draft, but the year prior. So it's interesting that, of course he's stuck around, but he is having a pretty good camp. So we'll see what happens in preseason with Barnes here. Nickelback, no surprises. Michael Carter, although he's still hurt. Corner, Sauce, DJ Reed as the two starters. Quantez Stiggers has earned himself the primary backup cornerback job. That is awesome, right? That is so cool. And granted, right, things are subjected to change, but at this point in time, this is how the Jets are feeling. Behind Stiggers, Brandon Eccles. And then last but not least, safety, the 2 starting safeties, Chuck Clark and Tony Adams, Ashton Davis, and then Isaiah Oliver, Jalen Key and Jarius Monroe, and then Al Blades. And then Al Blades coming in at the bottom of the safety position here. And then special teams, right? Greg Zuerlein, Thomas Morstead, kicker, punter, Thomas Hennessy, long snapper. And then as far as the kick return, right? Because we all knew Xavier Gibson was probably going to be the team's primary punt returner. But as far as kick return, Xavier Gibson, Isaiah Davis, Malachi Corley, and then Cordington. So it's the same exact layout as punt return. Which is interesting, right? Because we've also heard that Braylon Allen has been returning kicks, but there's an obvious push to get guys back there to return the ball who can create plays by themselves. Guys that are tough to bring down an open field, whether you're, a big bowling ball like Isaiah Davis, just will plow over anybody, or a shorter shiftier guy in Xavier Gibson. And then with Corley's kind of like a mix of both. But in any case, just wanted to go over the unofficial depth chart here. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. As always, go Jets.